Listening to music will change your DNA, son, is one of the lyrics in the song by Jason Mraz called Taking the Music. I'll probably go over that song lyric by lyric because the whole thing is explaining the power of music as it relates to the muse. I'm an instrument that the spirit gets to play. That's one of the lyrics, and he's talking about the spirit playing him as the instrument. I'm a tool in God's hands. There's way too many synchronicities and coincidences going on here with the storyline and the narrative I'm being able to put together. From that one, Change Your DNA, music. 46 and 2 by Tool, referencing a DNA upgrade. From the 42 and 2, Hivemind. Again, there's another correlation. We're talking about the Hivemind. And this DNA upgrade correlates with escape from that Hivemind to 46 and 2, and we're the in-between species of 44 and 2. Here, let me get rid of some of that bounce. We're the in-between species between some tribes that are left in Africa and the Aborigines of Australia that are a 42 and 2 chromosome count. We are 44 and 2 and 46 and 2 just ahead of me, and Melchizedek, the Druvlov Melchizedek, says those 2 chromosomes make all the difference. The Hivemind, the Insectillions, the Mormons, they have a beehive as their logo, and my last time going to church with them was probably my last time ever, because the old lady who says, we're happiest, let's all remember that we're happiest when we obey the requests of our leaders, when we're obedient to the requests of our leaders. There's a difference between doing for others out of compassion and doing for others out of compliance. And that's the difference between faith without works is dead, and by grace alone you seek salvation. In their hive mind, we're just going to refer to this as the insectillion hive mind spirit, and the left-wing Democrat Party and the mindset that goes along with it, because we can see there ain't much but a dime of difference between the Republicans and Democrats now. The hive mind that the Mormons probably subscribe to or have gotten infiltrated and taken over by. Only requires faith. By faith alone ye are saved. The Insectillion and the Reptilian. The Insectillion, the hive mind, only requires compliance and obedience.
Continue on I-80 West for 2 miles.
Requires work.
In 2 miles, take exit 99 for State Highway 36 towards Stansbury Tool.
Exit. There we go. We shut up her telling me which direction to go. Faith without works is but dead. If you want into the other mindset that is more reflective of the Republican Party, individualism, hard work, and you voluntarily contribute to others. Remember me the other day saying that doing for others is a greater motivation for me than doing for myself? Well, what are you, part of the hive mind? You think that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and the collective is more important than the individual? Why would you contribute to others more so than yourself? Out of the spirit of compassion, not compliance. That's the difference. Like when I said you sign up for God's army and volunteer, or you'll be drafted into Satan's army and lose your free will. When you're fighting alongside people in the trenches, you want to be in an all-volunteer army. This applies to regular, like, Vietnam draftees. There's a big difference when you're fighting beside someone who joined because, well, I decided to volunteer to join the Air Force or I was going to get drafted into the Marines. That was my dad's reason. Don't want to be a bullet stopper and get drafted into the Marines or the Army, so I'm going to join the Air Force. In God's army, everyone is there committed and is passionate to and committed to the cause as the guy that's standing next to them. None of them are there out of compliance and obedience and fear of the alternative consequence if they don't join this army that just drafted them and took away their free will. And you can see people losing their free will all around us, and that uniformity of compliance to the groupthink is what is taking away their free will to think for themselves. All it takes is one other person within the group to say something other than the unanimous consensus reality that everyone else recites, and it allows everyone else in the group to start thinking for themselves again and choosing of their own free will what they do or don't think, believe, and want to practice. So what you just heard me reference was referring to the reptilian spirit as the compassionate one and the insectilian spirit as the discompassionate one. In that group hive mind, conformity, not compassion, is why you serve the group. And submission and compliance is all that's required. You don't have to work. You sign on the libtard plantation, you get a check. That's all that's required is obedience and submission. On the other side, faith without works is but dead. I just got a message. I'm not sure what it said. I missed it. So I'm going to talk. So, up until now, you've heard the human spirit is the one of compassion, the mammalian brain, and the reptilian is the one that's cold-hearted. As opposed to reptilian and insectilian, the one that they convinced you doesn't exist. I'm going to talk now about how hair equals antenna. Samson lost his power when he cut his hair. The Vril Society in Germany, the women that were not allowed to cut their hair. The Native American sun dancers would grow their hair long, and the civilized people warned all their followers, don't you dare let your hair grow long, or you'll get the witch hunt treatment like we give to those sun dancers who would grow their hair long. And the spirit those Native Americans were in contact with was the original transmission, the frequency going out to the biobot transceivers that was here before the invasion of the foreign substance into our collective consciousness. And maybe there's a reason for the mental immune system to attack all foreign substances. But I got some other stuff I'm going to talk about, like in the comments section is where I just got that stuff about hair being antenna. Half of my last 7 or 8 videos have been based on or completely comprised of content and leads that I got from the comments section. While I'm on the subject, most people don't want credit for their contribution to this growing body of knowledge that we're all contributing to. But the insectilian video that I referenced from Jamie Lee of A Plain Truth, someone brought it to my attention that he got it from a YouTube page called God Gilv Namaste, or something like that. I can't pronounce it. I'll leave the link in the description. And when you use someone else's entire body of information and their work without adding anything to it, of course you should give them credit. The interruptions and the frequency of the interruptions that I gave yesterday during that presentation were far beyond enough to avoid copyright content. Even if only thing I did was explain that sun tunnel, the link between the two worlds, is what I have photographic evidence of, and now that sun tunnel is explained and validated and verified. I have the photographic evidence, they seem to have the explanation, and I waited for the entire first 20 minutes of the video to go by until it gets to the sun part where they show they drill a hole in our plasma sphere using and turning our sun into the injection point from which they get into our world. Even if I let it go for the first 20 minutes uninterrupted and just at that point said, there, the sun tunnel, that's what I have photographic evidence of, and then let the remainder of the video go, that alone is enough contribution to the content of the understanding that anyone who's not letting the letter of the law interfere with the spirit of the law would look at that and say, yeah, let him go. He added enough to this body of information and understanding. Showing his photographic evidence of the sun tunnel and correlating our understanding of the sun tunnel to his photographic evidence, that's enough. That pretty much doubles the body of work. So ask yourself, Which resonates more with the music? In the spirit of the music, if you listen to the Christians, which as we discussed yesterday are the insectilian religion that's infiltrated this whole planet, they will tell you Satan was the musician in heaven. So if you're getting spiritual messages through the music, then that's the devil. Ask yourself this. If you're split between insectilian and reptilian, right brain, left brain, heart and mind, masculine and feminine, which is music more attuned to? That would be the right brain that we've been told about. Our concept of right brain, left brain is right brain is feminine, has to do with emotion and intuition. Left brain is masculine. Right brain is more like the heart. Left brain is more like the brain. Right brain is more like human compassion. Left brain is more like cold and discompassionate, artificial, like a computer without any sentiment involved. Watch the music video, You Live in a Cell Between Mind and Heart by Enigma. But my point was, if you're comparing insects and reptiles, which is more resonating with music? As I said, I've just told you that the reptilian consciousness is the more compassionate one. Imagine a snake charmer blowing his flute, and the snake comes out and starts dancing to the music. We have a lot more in common with a serpent than an insect. They are vertebrates. They have a spine. They have skin. As opposed to an exoskeleton, they have an internal skeleton. So as much as you've been programmed against the reptilian, when you're starting to understand that it's not a difference between human consciousness or reptilian consciousness, it's 10% human mammalian, a monkey on the outside, a shell of a monkey, with insectilian or reptilian traits as the operating system within the computer hardware. The mammalian is the external hardware of your computer. The internal software operating systems are insectilian or reptilian. One is far less compassionate than the other. And until now, you've taken this in the context of human or reptilian, and we know the reptilians are the cold-hearted, discompassionate ones. If you readjust your thinking and take it in terms of insectilian or reptilian, you can follow along here and understand that this muse is emanating from the spirit that the Native Americans, who grew their hair long and were originally in tune with the spirit of the earth, that is the spirit of the music. And that is why The Weeknd, in his music video, The Blinding Lights, has those vertical slit pupils. I want to also talk about the phantom photon DNA effect, where we know that emotion entrains DNA, and DNA entrains light. The higher vibratory frequency of love oscillates at a much higher frequency than the slower wave of fear. And each time one of these waves crosses the DNA double helix, it turns on or off a switch. Love is the higher vibratory frequency, fear is the lower vibratory frequency. And do not hear one as good and the other as bad. It gives you a different opportunity to have that emotion cross the helix more times with the higher vibratory frequency of love, or fewer times with the lower vibratory frequency of fear. But what they've learned through the phantom photon DNA effect is that when you put DNA into a vacuum tube, the light photons align along the double helix. And then when you remove the DNA from the vacuum tube, those light photons are still aligned along where the double helix was and no longer is. So from this, we can say emotion entrains DNA and DNA entrains light. Light is the substance that makes up our whole world. All matter is merely energy slowed to a dense vibration to the point where it becomes solid. Like when water goes from a phase transition because it vibrates at a higher frequency when it goes from ice, where it's solid, to liquid, where it's water, to gas where it's steam. Even when it's ice, it's still vibrating. It's still moving inside. Those molecules and particles are still vibrating, just at a lower frequency, so it's solid. As those vibratory frequencies and those molecules move faster and faster, it heats up and becomes liquid. As those vibratory frequencies increase and those molecules move even faster, it heats up and becomes steam. And Greg Braden talked about how we would be going through a phase transition and our bodies would change very quickly. The near-death experience is what allows you to relinquish that fear and truly start to live like you were dying at a higher vibratory frequency. And in that, you develop eyes to see, because the amygdala regulates the melanin and dopamine to your eye, which decides what you can and can't see. And at that point of the near-death experience, the amygdala backs off the brakes and gives you all gas. Say, okay, let this guy see everything for a minute. He's about to go out. That near-death experience allows you to see. Imagine the average human only sees at 30 to 60 frames per second. Imagine if you could see at 500 frames per second, 150 frames per second. You would then see at a quicker rate. Here I will inject the information of Robin Hanson at the Mormon Transhumanist Association and at Google Talks. It's pretty much the same talk that he gives the whole time, and he refers to M's, like Sims in a simulated world. You're familiar with the Sims. He calls them M's, emulated human beings. And high speed is high class. Because your operating systems are operating at higher speed, it's like time is going by faster for you. And if you could see at 150 frames per second instead of 30 to 60, it would be like time slowed down. And your current visual perception is at 30 to 60, which by comparison would be like a time lapse. Where when you take video, you can take a still frame every 1 second or a minute and make a video of the entire night compressed down into 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, depending on how quick the frequency with which you took a still frame image. If you take one every second, 1 frame per second, the whole night would compress down into an hour. If you took 1 frame per minute, the whole night would compress down into 1 minute. But you would have a video of the whole night, depending on how many frames per second. That's a time lapse. So if you can see at more frames per second, it's like your perception of time is compressed. Time goes faster, or is it slower? That's where it gets a little sticky. But if this whole reality is like your screen, like a big hologram flickering at frames per second, and you can now see at more frames per second, it's like you have another dimension of depth perception to your vision. And the best way I can describe it is like those movies where you got to put on the 3D glasses, one red, one blue. By the way, that's key. And then you take off the glasses, you put on the glasses, and it turns into a 3D hand. You take off the glasses, and it turns into something like 2 silhouettes of the same hand side by side. You put the glasses in 2 dimensions. You put the glasses back on, it turns into a 3-dimensional hand. When you can see at more frames per second, it's like the world out there develops a 4th dimension of depth perception. James True talks about this in near-death experiencers and crystal meth addicts, because they're seeing at more frames per second. Just a couple of quick additions to the videos from yesterday. The Wasp uses an injection to get mind control over the spider, to get the spider to do its bidding. Need I say any more? The other thing I was going to mention, if I can find it on here again. The Journey album cover has a scarab beetle on the front. They included it yesterday in that video we went over, but I failed to mention it as it went past. But as for love having a higher vibratory frequency than fear, and this near-death experience relinquishes your fear and gives you the eyes to see, opens up your third eye, the eye of Ra, through the regulation of the dopamine and the melanin from your amygdala. Love is the key. Drowning may have been what baptism really was, a near-death experience via drowning, like waterboarding. And after you go limp and they drag you up on the shore and tilt your head downhill and pump that water out of your chest and you come back to life, you're born again. And now you can really start living. If you get in a fist fight with someone who sees at 30 to 60 frames per second and you see at 150 frames per second, there's probably not much competition there. The time-lapse analogy applies here. If they're only seeing it half as many frames per second as you are, it's like they've got a time-lapse video coming in their eyes, their feed, their perception. When you've got actual video in real time, they're only getting 1 frame per second, and you're getting 30 frames per second in real video speed, but they're getting 1 frame per second in something like a time lapse. There's no competition there. And you've heard that they live, operate just outside our range of perception because they vibrate at a frequency that's a little higher or a little faster than our eyes are able to perceive. That might be why on camera you're able to catch these blinks that go this way instead of this way. But if you didn't need a camera and your eyes operated at a higher rate of frames per second or a higher frequency, you wouldn't need the camera. And we've all heard that you only use 10% of your brain and all this junk DNA. So it stands to reason that DNA upgrades along with consciousness upgrades coincide with these kind of abilities. So everyone thinks, oh yeah, that'd be awesome to have like eagle eyes and be able to see miles down the road, or have eagle ears, highly sensitive hearing. Maybe not like a dog, highly sensitive smelling. That might kind of actually suck. But people think it'd be super duper cool to have that high sensitivity of vision or audio. Imagine being able to hear a bug on the ground walking. We've all seen this kind of thing in movies where suddenly a person can hear the bug's legs hitting the ground every step he takes. Or as you're walking, you can hear your belt buckle squeaking. You ever had to WD-40 your belt buckle? It would be maddening if it was a change and you weren't born with that type of perception and suddenly you were given a extremely high level of hearing and you could hear all the little sounds around you that you previously couldn't hear. It would be maddening. And that's why incremental slow drip acclimates the person in such a way that it doesn't send them into shock. You know, kind of like that guy that I was just a little while back, when my videos were something like watching a slow motion train wreck, and you saw that all these cars are tumbling all these different directions. The one thing nobody expected was for these cars to tumble back onto the track, get vertical, hooked up, and keep on going. That's the one thing nobody saw coming. Particularly the family and friends that hid in the background didn't respond to any of my emails or text messages. You never said a word, you didn't send me no letters. Don't think you will forgive you. That's from Prayer in C by Lily Woods and the Prick. Link is in the description. Our world is slowly dying, I'm not wasting no more time. Don't think you will forgive you when life is all over and there's just silence forget how the lyrics go. I'll have to brush up on that one. And the reason my aperture was dialed back down for a while was so that I could come back and tell you these same things that I already told you, but in a more logical, rational, coherent way. In a more relatable way than the crazy guy that I was the first time I was telling you all that stuff. And so this collective initiation that we're all in now, where we go through a near-death experience in order to lose that fear and open your aperture, is what Greg Braden spoke of when he talked about awakening to 0 point and beyond 0 point, the collective initiation. That was the title to his 2 videos that I watched 20 some odd years ago. Awakening to 0 point is referring to zero magnetics, plasma fire, colorful clouds, auroras in New Mexico and other places recently on MB3. I saw a meme the other day. Is this Somali looking guy going, "Look at me, white man, you are the terrorist now." Oh my, how the tables have changed. What if you are the Illuminati now? Does that make you evil? Because you're already part of a very small group who knows a lot more about the way this reality works than the people around you. Does that make you evil? The way I know the spirit I've tapped into is the good spirit. And it couldn't have told me this 2 years ago, or I would have thought, you're appealing to my vanity and ego. I know what spirit this is. And over the last 2 years, there's been other changes that could not have happened without the 2 years of developing this relationship. And I said, there will come a time very soon where you can't develop a loving relationship with this spirit. The closest thing you can is a Stockholm syndrome, because you know you have no other choice and nowhere to go. Stockholm syndrome is when you fall in love with your captor, when you're abducted. And the way I know that the spirit that leads and guides and interacts with me is the good spirit, and it's not just all good or bad, black and white. There's many variations and gradations in between, just like in humans, is based on my life's work. I've said it before. Sonia Sorensen, FBI Cyber Squad Division. Paula Houston, Pornography and Obscenities States Ombudsman for Utah. The head of the BACA chapter, Bikers Against Child Abuse, where I was showing them still frames that I would see in commercials. And they started saying, "Wait a minute, how did you even see this? Were you like going through these commercials frame by frame or what?" Instead of addressing the message, they wanted to shoot the messenger. When I was showing them that these sandals commercials for these all-inclusive vacation packages that cater to the most exquisite tastes, wink wink, were slipping still frames of kids spread eagle coming down the water slide in between scenes, and it was just like Tyler Durden on Fight Club. In between scenes was one of the instances of the many that I captured on VHS, and I'll explain more about that later. But the point is, there are people on the other side of the spectrum who have also tapped into the spirit, who know by the same line of logic, their life effort, their life works, and the things that that spirit encourages and enables and empowers them to do, it could not be anything other than the bad spirit. So many people in that comment section, from DubJ613 or 315 or whatever it is with the reptilian eyes, every person in there is willing to start committing genocide based on pupil shape. It said you will know them by their fruits. So DubJ was just showing us a video that's been circulated around the last couple of years that very well could have been CGI. But when I show you the cover of the Eurythmics, they didn't have CGI back then. Maybe she was wearing contacts. I've asked you before, would you be willing to wear contacts to protect the innocent from the knuckle-dragging troglodytes who think that they're doing the good Lord's work by killing off this seed of Satan? When I ask you this, referencing the music video called Stole the Show by Kygo, where there's an alien craft crash landed and they tell them, okay, yeah, all ETI parties are good to go. ETI parties are good to go. In order that the ETI can get to the nearest ETI party where everyone's dressed up like an ETI and he can blend in and make some friends. Would you be willing to protect the innocent, knowing that we have absolutely zero evidence of evil doing by these people with this pupil shape that we're all so certain makes them evil, so certain that we would engage in the genocide. It's real easy to join in with everyone else when everyone's unanimously got the same opinion, point the finger at the bad guy. Oh yeah, I hate them too. Oh yeah, they're evil too. What'd he say? Tony Montana, say goodbye to the bad guy. It's gonna be a long time before you see another bad guy like this.